1 o'clock. Welcome to another Research Town Hall. I'm Peter Barr Gillespie, Chief Research Officer. And before I get started in introducing today's Town Hall, I have just a couple comments. First of all, spectacularly nice day outside, although it's a little chilly. I hope you're enjoying looking out on the blue sky. Second is we've got a few more town halls scheduled, so you might want to mark your calendars. On December 16th, we're going to have two of the Faculty Excellence and Innovation awardees giving presentation on their research, Jamie Lowe and Picado Tefesse. On January 6th, we've got a panel discussion on the new NIH grant review guidelines, which will be used, I think, starting with grants submitted in January sometime. So that will be a significant change. And joining Rachel Dresbeck will be Wei Wu, Nabil Al-Qayed, and Don Conrad, as well as Bonnie Nagel and me, to discuss what this will mean for writing grants as well as reviewing them. And then finally, on January 27th, we have a town hall on research and information policy, an update on that. But today, we're going to hear about OCTRI. So the title of the town hall is OCTRI 5.0, Translational Science Funding Opportunities, and it's presented by Cindy Morris. Cindy's a professor of medical informatics and clinical epidemiology in the School of Medicine, but she's also the director of the Oregon Clinical and Translational Research Institute, or OCTRI as we all know it. So OCTRI is our so-called CTSA hub, and CTSA stands for Clinical and Translational Science Award, which is a huge NIH program that is designed to support institutions in catalyzing translation of research discoveries into improved clinical care. And I'm sure Cindy's going to give you a much deeper introduction to OCTRI and the CTSA program. So Cindy, I'll turn it over to you now.
All right, well, thank you very much. I have to apologize because I caught a Thanksgiving cold, and so you're going to have to suffer through my voice a little bit here. At least I have more voice than I did 2 days ago. So with that, let's go to the slides, please. Thank you. Okay, and let's move on to the next one. Perfect, thank you. So what is OCTRI? So I'm going to start today by talking a little bit about where we are today, where we've been and where we are today. But more importantly, this is to introduce you to our next submission, which will be in May of 26. So we have been preparing since August for our May 26 submission, in part because there are some changes afoot here, and we want to get your input on those. So just as a reminder, I think you just heard a little bit about this, but we are part of a national network, a national consortium that frankly works very, very well together of similarly funded NIH institutions around the country. There are approximately 60 of these at academic medical centers who are all working together to improve the translational research process. The point is to get treatments to more patients more quickly. Okay, next slide, please. So what are we? We are truly an infrastructure grant. So we have many components here at the university, and we'll kind of continue just to run quickly through what those components are and how we work together. Next slide, please. We build research. So we have many different components, as I said, who work as a team to help build research for early career folks, for people who may have a basic science discovery and are trying to move it to a population or to the individual patient. But we can help you with all stages of this building. We are part of, we have community engagement. We have a strong data science program that is inclusive of both informatics and biostatistics. Some of you may know me in the past from workforce development and the HIT program and some of the other K awards here. So that's a component of it too. And as we go forward, we have what we call a clinical research development team. And this really helps to build research from thinking about appropriate study design, recruitment, regulatory issues. We also have a physical place where research can happen in our Clinical Translational Research Center. We're also very much about entrepreneurship and thinking about how we can help build components around device or drug development. And similarly we do award some pilot awards, and we also evaluate the program. And more recently, we are working as part of implementation and dissemination science. So this is how we do this. Next slide, please. We do it as a team. We don't want to send you to, as often happens, send you to someone to talk about data management. You have an idea for a study. First, you talk maybe to a statistician, and then you talk to someone else who may have a lot of expertise in study design. Then you talk to someone in the community, and before you know it, you are getting ideas that don't all fit together. So we meet with people as a team and coordinate our advice and guidance to you. We can do this and frequently do this as part of a single session and then follow up afterwards. Or we can do it in a more complex manner and meet with someone over a number of different intervals to help you build a grant that is not only fundable, but is feasible. And so once you get the award, the number of details to work out will come much more easily to you. Okay, next slide, please. We're also in the community. So we actually have a community research hub as part of OCTRI that is in Bend. And we have liaisons who are all around the state and work in different environments to help you be able to place your research in the community. We're also affiliated with ORPRN, the Oregon Rural Practice-Based Research Network, and can be affiliated with the clinical practices in OCTRI. One other really important thing I think to keep in mind is that we have tried to bring clinical and translational research expertise to the state of Oregon. So we have partners at University of Oregon, Oregon State University, and at Portland State University. And those will be our partners going forward to the next grant application. All right, next slide, please. And this slide may be familiar to some of you. So we have now more than 20 years of experience that actually predate OCTRI into helping build the research workforce at OHSU. Some of those come from our Human Investigations program that is available to anyone on faculty or any fellows here. And some students as well to begin to build the competencies of clinical and translational research in the workforce. Some of you may know we have affiliated what currently is called the TL1 program It's just like a T32, and a KL2 program that is just like a K-12 program. We also maintain a physician scientist track for medical students to gain, to be able to take a year out in research. And then some of you also may know our programs in conjunction with Portland State University that have brought over 600 underrepresented and disadvantaged students into the workforce. All right, next slide, please. We also have an innovation program that Aditi Martin runs. This includes everything from intellectual property protection and transactions, from managing collaborations, from funding technologies. We have some pilot awards that are given. We can help support new ventures. And as well, we have a number of different entrepreneurial education programs to help you build your expertise in being able to do this. Okay, next slide, please. We're also data. We have a variety of different interactions with this throughout the data lifecycle. This is the data lifecycle that's shown here. Everything from being able to generate the data, and so solutions to store clinical research data, also to obtain and use real world data. So what do I mean by real world data? Things that are large data sets that come from clinical practice, or come from transactions with health insurers, or come from federal data sources that may be built, like the Insane Survey or the All of Us survey. So we can help obtain and use real world data. We can help provide some custom solutions to help collect data through mobile health apps and through a variety of different ways to collect outcome data without, as an example, making a patient come to OHSU as maybe we used to 20 years ago. And we can help you display and analyze data. So we're very much about helping you use and understand data. Next slide, please. So how to get started. I really want to now spend time talking about the OCTRI of the future and where we're going. But what I also want to give you the opportunity here to connect with our current OCTRI navigators. We try to consolidate things so you can make either one phone call, if you're so inclined to use the phone. People actually do pick the phone up here. And we have a website, of course, and you can get in touch with us through that website. And we promise you we'll follow back and help you answer your questions or solve whatever problems you're having if it's possible. Next slide. So now I want to spend much more time to talk about where we are going. We were first funded in 2006. We were one of the first 12 CTSA sites funded in the country. And there have been many that have come and gone since then, but now the total number is right around 60, as I said. We have been renewed competitively in 5-year cycles since 2006. Our next renewal is due in 2027. I should say our next renewal will be in 2027, thinking optimistically. And our application for that is due in May of 2026. These are big grants to write. On average, they're approximately, let's just say, 2,000 pages. They take a lot of work. This will be a lot of our next year's effort on this. But to get there, the way that we're funded by NCATS, the National Center for Advancing Translational Science. And as a program, they have now changed what are now called NOFOs by NIH. And this is the way that our application is solicited and what we have to write to and answer to. Rather than one large application that would also included a K-12 or KL2 grant and a TL1 grant in the past. Now we are invited to submit a suite of 7 applications on the same day. This is a big, giant accomplishment. And frankly, of all the CTSA hubs that have gone before us, not very many have been able to accomplish submitting 7 grants simultaneously. So I think our word is now, and our thought is here, we will absolutely submit what is required and maybe a little bit extra on that day. And then we can submit more of these applications on the next cycle or the cycle after that. It's not limited. So the UM1 is the core application, and this is this includes essentially all of the services that we provide and a little more, which I'll show you in a second. We will also submit for a K-12 to renew our current KL2. And now we have to submit separate T32 applications for both for pre-doc and post-doc. They can't be in the same application. And I can tell you we're choosing to submit a pre-doc T32. We can also submit for an R25, which is an undergraduate or very early career, like medical students or graduate students, program that will bring particularly around diversity, and we can build upon this. Much of the grants that we have funded through Portland State already. And then there's something called an RC2 that I'm going to come back to, which is essentially multidisciplinary grant around innovation. The thing that I'm going to spend most of the rest of this talk focusing on is the fact that there is a new emphasis on translational science. So go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so this wasn't the slide that I thought it was, but hold your thought here for a minute around translational science and translational research and what they mean, because I know I'm going to get to that slide in just a second here. So for those of you who've been paying attention so long, I appreciate for the first part of this, I want to give you your reward now for that and talk about how you can help participate in our renewal, and hope this will keep you in there for the next number of slides that talk about translational science. So we are looking to identify impactful research barriers to help work on solutions. And today we're releasing an RFA within OHSU for a pilot study, or maybe more than one, maybe 2 pilot studies. We want you to think about research barriers, research challenges, things that need solution that may be holding your research back. Okay, can you advance that? I forgot I have a bunch of advances here, Amy. Thanks. So as part of our UM1, there is what we call element E. And element E is a sort of cryptic NIH or CTSA speak that is essentially an embedded research project in our overall OCTRI application. And this is about an R01 or R21 sized project, maybe 250K, 300K per year that is included, and it's funded for about 2 to 3 years. It's very it's important that this be about translational science. And that's why I'm going to spend some time talking about this. It has to address a research barrier and help propose and test a generalizable solution. The point of this in all the hubs is so that essentially NCATS will have 60 individual research projects funded as part of the consortium that help to advance translational science and the speed of that translation. I'm going to show you a number of examples and a number of, so that you can help better understand what this is. What we're releasing today is this RFA that will provide some pilot funding to help provide preliminary data, some feasibility data, and advance one, please. Thank you. So, and that will go into our application. So we want a highly competitive proposal that will go into our application ultimately in May as what we call Element E, and we will work with you on that. There's two other opportunities, and these are called RC2 opportunities. And this is a separate application that proposes a high-impact interdisciplinary project around translational science that will accompany the main UM1. So these can go, we can submit up to 2. These can go in either in May or maybe a little more likely 1 in May, 1 in September, or in a different cycle. They are judged apart from the overall UM1 application. So they tend to have a little bit of life of their own. But this is why we're looking for these innovative solutions, because we do have some opportunities. And just one more click, please. And what this shows you is that we will have future pilot studies under the UM1 that will be oriented to translational science, that will be additional opportunities. Those will only come once we have full funding out of this, we hope in 2027, which I know sounds like a long way off, but we're almost in 2025. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is the slide I thought was coming up next. You all probably have heard about translational research, and we think about this as the pipeline of moving from the lab to the clinical environment, to that first test of something in a patient, to relevancy in clinical practice, and even perhaps out to what we sometimes call T4 research, or getting into health policy, even creating health policy down the road. So we're all familiar with translational science. OCTRI has been very much about translational science. Sorry, I keep doing that. Translational research from our onset of funding. But now there's a nuance to this, and this nuance is that NIH is asking us to be oriented and thinking about translational science. Now, we've been doing some of this. We just haven't always called it translational science. But now we just need to make this more familiar to people so that when you're thinking about how you can help join with us in our application, that you have some understanding of what translational science is. I have to say, we've been talking about this within the CTSA for, probably 18 months now, and it's a nuanced topic, frankly. What is the difference between translational research and translational science? And I want to give you some examples of this and hope that you'll gain some understanding of this. So this is really research on research. So if you want to think about it that way, translational science focuses on those sort of research innovations that may help overcome longstanding challenges in the translational research pipeline. Some of those may be scientific obstacles or roadblocks. Some of them, frankly, are operational and administrative roadblocks. And it's really just changing the way we do things sometimes. It's thinking about using some creativity and innovations to transform the way research is really done, making it faster, more efficient, and to have greater impact. All right, next slide, please. And Amy, I apologize on this already because there's going to be a lot of clicking here. But these are the translational science principles. I know they look a lot like Girl Scout and Boy Scout badges. That's been sort of the humor behind this, but they each have a purpose. They each illustrate a concept behind what translational science is. So if you would click once, please. So let's start with this. Let's start with thinking about focusing on unmet needs. There's a lot of illnesses without effective treatment, and there's also sometimes a lack of appropriate experimental models for things. So one of the principles of translational science is to focus on unmet needs. Okay, click again. Let's think also about generalizable solutions. This is probably one of the key points here. Solutions that don't work only on one process or on one focus, but in fact maybe work in multiple different areas or across multiple disease states. So when we're thinking about advancing the process of science, it doesn't matter whether we're working in MS or working in cancer or whatever. This sort of way of getting research done has multiple applications. Okay, click again. And it's really thinking about using creativity and innovation. It's innovations that help broaden the impact of what you're doing. And it's also thinking about goals that may change the current paradigm of how we do research. Just some quick examples if you're just focusing on these first three. During the pandemic, there were some good things that came out of it, and part of it was a lot of new research methodologies. Part of it was new ways of doing what I spend a lot of my work doing, which is clinical trials. So there are new clinical trial designs that are really only 3-4 years old that have changed the way we can collaborate with each other across the US and improve the speed by which we can get answers. And I think you realize that particularly for some of the intervention trials with COVID, those relied upon some new trial designs that very much are translation at the core of translational science, things that can be applied across multiple processes, multiple disease states, and frankly have changed the paradigm of sometimes on how we can now do clinical trials. Okay, one more click, please. So research is a team science. And frankly, we all need to work together from different disciplines to integrate different concepts, different approaches. I think one of the key experiences I've had over the past 4 or 5 years has been incorporating social scientists in much of what we do and how we think about research. And this has really, I think, changed many things, particularly how we interact with the community. One more click. We also want the goal of all this, and one of the things, the core principle of translational science is to increase the pace, to be milestone driven. NIH is already milestone driven, to form teams more rapidly. One more click. To have boundary crossing partnerships as well. And those may include actually incorporating communities and patients into your research as partners. Also to work with industry or government that we may not have before. One more click. To be ambitious, to be bold and rigorous in what you do. So to be ambitious, to use rigorous approaches. You may fail the first time, but to think about using that failure to prompt your next move. So to really use a cycle of continuous improvement, and also to be able to generate reproducible data. Last click, please. Thank you. And this is around incorporating principles of DEIA in every aspect of your research, every single aspect that's up here. Okay, next slide, please. So with those principles in mind, now what sort of types of projects would we expect? Now that we've talked a little bit about translational science, those sorts of projects could be, you know, anything in this range, and maybe things that we haven't thought about yet. They could be around how we collect data, how we integrate data from multiple sources. Regulatory, there are so many improvements that are needed in obtaining consent, in the process for the IRB. Single center IRBs were part of that translational science, and I think there's still improvement that's needed here. Drug and device design, how we develop drugs, how we test them in first-in-human studies. All of these are open. Improving the process of early translation, improvements in research design, 3 new types of trials that have been, you know, developed even in the last 5 years. Adaptive trials, decentralized trials, platform, that really have all advanced our science here. Lots of advancements in community engagement and how we incorporate community feedback and community input from day one of planning a research project through interpreting data. Collecting specimens and outcome data from remote populations. We don't want every person that we interact with in a clinical study to have to be here physically. Sometimes it's needed, but not always. And so we want to think about how we are collecting specimens and collecting outcome data so we can greatly improve the diversity of who we include. Thinking about recruitment, retention, different types and different ways of analyzing data. Many of these things will require team science, and frankly, there's probably a whole lot more that aren't on here that would be very open to this process. Next slide. So I want to give you 2 specific examples of translational science that we have already embarked upon in OCTRI, and just as good examples here. So we know through working with ORPRIN as an example, there are many community practices involved here. Community practices, I think, particularly in primary care, are already overburdened and maximally stressed. So to come in with a research project and say, you've got to take this training, we want to do this, we want to have a person in your practice who may help to recruit, that's just not going to work. So we need to have a relatively light impact that minimizes impact. And we have worked for about 4 or 5 years now in a couple of very specific examples to come up with procedures and policies that will minimize the impact so that we're able to recruit without having a negative impact on those practices whatsoever. We also have partnered with Night Cancer, particularly around use of social media, to increase accessibility to people who may live in a broad geographic area so that we can diversify the participants. So I think what we've also been thinking about here is how can we use input from people who may work in many different areas, from social marketing to sociology, just to a variety of different disciplines, so that we can help improve our ability and really come up with some sort of a process or algorithm that uses social media to help recruit people. So what motivates people to join research? What do we know culturally? What do we know that may have more appeal to one population or another? We're not all the same in what motivates us to join research. So to think about that and how we can really reach everyone to give everyone that opportunity. Okay, next slide, please. So here's some very specific examples of what translational research and translational science is. So keep in mind what we are looking for when we are looking at these pilot proposals and these letters of impact that we've been talking about. We're looking for things that are a little more on the right side, but they have to have a translational research context as well. So here's an example of a translational research concept. Maybe it's around a phase 1 trial of a new compound that has proven effective in reducing damage from ischemia in an animal model. Okay, so how do you make that and think about that in translational science context? Well, maybe it's around developing a model or assay that can better find predictors of efficacy in humans than can the current cell or animal models. That's translational science. That would be something we would be very much open to in our, like we were talking about as an element E in our application. Or maybe you're thinking of a study around how to identify early biomarkers of MS. So because that's specific to a focus, let's think about the translational science context here. Well, maybe it's around developing a reliable framework or a model to how we can identify biomarkers that change early in an intervention and how they may predict the efficacy of that intervention. So again, it's taking the framework or concept around this that is more generalizable than just for MS. And so it's being able to express both the translational research and the translational science. Or maybe it's around creating a registry to study the impact here of type 2 diabetes in Oregon communities. Well, there is no one data source that can do that, but there are ways that you could develop a system that merged data from multiple data sources, from all payers, all claims data, from individual large system developments, say like OHSU and Kaiser, and to be able to merge these from multiple resources to create a representative population data set that could be used for research. Again, it's not something, you may do it in the context of type 2 diabetes, but this may be something, in fact, that has much broader use beyond that. And then finally, maybe you want to do something, maybe your research focus is around improving the diversity of recruitment into trials of Alzheimer's disease prevention, and that's your very specific focus. But in fact, you can make that a translational science hypothesis to say, we're going to systematically study the barriers that prevent enrollment of participants into clinical trials. That may be around geography, may be around trust, what their motivation would be, what the outreach is, their health and digital literacy. But in fact, you are using Alzheimer's disease as a very specific focus, but what you are learning and advancing in a translational science application or hypothesis would have broader impact than that and be more generalizable. All right, next slide, please. So now I'm going to show you 4 very specific examples of what other hubs have written into their grant applications and have reviewed well. Now, as I said, we all of the sites in the CTSA consortium, we truly are collaborative. So there's great sharing on how different sites have come up with the studies that they are including and in how they have been, how they've reviewed. So, and you'll see that all four are very different. So it just gives you an idea of what our goal is and what we're looking for. So first hub, their overall theme for this project is around enhancing engagement in translational science and translational research using innovative strategies and methods. So the first thing that they may be about is the fact that a lot of research data is collected as part of many of the clinical studies that we do, but it's not all input into the electronic health record. And so what they're trying to do is to integrate the process of collecting patient-generated data. So patient outcomes that they may report, patient-reported outcomes, into the electronic health record so that they can be used. And they're using the specific example here in a study of patients who are recovering from sepsis. So what are they doing? Well, they're building the ability to get that patient-generated data into the EHR. So that's kind of the part one of what they're doing. Part two now is about recruiting a more diverse population into clinical trials, and knowing that it's often very difficult to do that, and it just takes time, particularly around the elements of diversity. It takes a lot of work to do this. And so they're doing a trial of what they're calling patient-driven recruitment that would enhance the speed and diversity of that recruitment, particularly for something relatively common like administration of a flu vaccine. So how can we reach a broader, more generalizable population? They're using methods that they're calling patient-driven recruitment. I think in the context that some of you may know this, and this is also snowball recruiting. So you recruit one patient, that one patient may give you some names or ways to recruit other people, maybe some of their friends, maybe people from their church community. And before you know it, through a couple of waves of patient-driven recruitment, now you have a much broader, more diverse population. So they're testing the effectiveness of this with the thought that this sort of methods for patient-driven recruitment could be used in studies of any different types in the future, particularly for common conditions. And then last, they're also trying to incorporate methods around how we would eventually disseminate a given trial at the start. So that's their overall plan for what they're calling element E. Okay, next slide, please. Now here's one with a very different context. This is a rural state. And I think we've all realized that, this widespread access to smartphones allows us to access health data that may be collected in a person's home. And yet, sometimes you have to either write a custom app, they can be difficult to use. And in particular, in this rural state, they complain that, or they're saying that, particularly for use of other devices that may require more bandwidth, they just don't have the bandwidth in some of the rural in the rural areas to be able to collect data like that. They were using the example of blood pressure monitors that were connected via Bluetooth, and saying that this was just way too difficult for many of their communities to use. So what their hub is around is collecting a reliable, flexible, scalable platform to be able to collect remote data from study participants. They're building that platform so that it could be used for sharing images, for sharing video and audio files, for collecting health-related data, such as data from Fitbits or other types of monitors. So what are the ways, the reliable ways that they can do that and help enable those, not as a one-time effort, but as a platform that others can use? And then they're doing this in a specific context. They're intending to recruit and observe and follow a cohort of women in pregnancy who are monitored for weight and blood pressure for early detection of preeclampsia. So what is the mobile text they're using? They're trying to figure out how they can use blood pressure monitors and get reliable estimates of weight from participants in this rural state. So this is the context that they're testing this platform. Next slide, please. Here's something very different. We talked a little bit about real-world data early on, and the theme that this one particular hub is using that, and I think some of you who may have used geographic data realize that sometimes the geographic data for which we get social determinants of health can be pretty broad areas. Zip code is a really common one. Well, think about people who may live in your zip code, and there may be people at very broad ends of that spectrum. And so what they are using is they want to expand and improve collection of social determinants of health in this real world data. The first thing that they're doing is just trying to enable more of the early career people and trainees and scholars at their institution to use real world data and data that's already been collected. And so their first is more of an educational training objective to see if they can increase use of data from large national data sets. But the second one is where this really comes in. So they're using a machine learning approach to apply US Census Tract data to test for bias in social deprivation indices so that they can better understand how to get the unit of measure down to a more unbiased unit that then they can incorporate in future studies and in fact in a present study. So they're using the PRIDE study, which is of LGBT health nationally, so that they can apply some lessons here that they have learned in data collection, curation, and harmonization to really improve the architecture of this study to incorporate new understandings of, particularly from people who may live in underrepresented and who may be underrepresented, live in vulnerable communities. So it's really now trying to use these in very specific examples to improve how we look and measure social determinants of health in large-scale data sets. Next slide, please. This is the last one I'll show you, but this is a really cool project I heard about recently. And this is we all have questions about, as researchers, we often think about problems and issues from our own viewpoint or what we can do, but we don't always pause to think about, well, what does the community need? Where are those health inequities in the community? What are the causes? How can we help find solutions and track progress? So they are taking the entire state, they're working with their state health department and community partners to create a statewide map of health measures and different analyses so that they can identify health inequities and things like what sort of coverage is there in primary care in different areas of the state? How many deaths from opioid use occur in different areas, and how can we find solutions for those health inequities? So they're taking then this statewide mapping, and they're using this disseminating this to help support researchers to increase research and solution finding in some of these areas to help improve care to work with policymakers and learners to develop these strategies to reduce inequities. And then they're tracking it, and they're calling what they're calling bright spot assets, or what some of us might call positive deviants, to look at what are those communities that are doing really well on different social measures or different health measures, and how can we extend what we can learn there to the other communities who aren't doing well within the same state. So again, this is a large project that their CTSA hub is taking on as part of this. Okay, next slide, please. Just about at the end. So what is the process now for you to contribute in OCTRI? One click, please. So the first step, so think about the issue or barrier or whatever, and we are soliciting letters of intent that describe the barrier or research challenge and the proposed solution. So everything I have presented in the last 6 slides or so have been, here's what the barrier is, and here is a solution that they have found. So this is a collaborative agreement with us. We will work with you to think about this barrier, this challenge, and what those solutions are, so that you're not on your own for thinking of those. Next, sorry, one click, please. Step 2. Step 2 is that there will be an internal committee within OCTRI that is going to assess these letters of intent to narrow the pool to those that appear to have the most promise as element E. Now, I can tell you from all the other institutions that have gone through this sort of process thus far, it can be kind of a steep gradient. So, you know, if there are some institutions I've heard they got 20 letters of intent and they may only have gone forward with 5. I have no idea where we are on this. I think we've learned a lot about how to express what we're looking for here, what translational science and translational research really mean. So, you know, we'll have to see how this goes. One click, please. Step 3, we propose to fund a feasibility study. So we may award up to 2 at somewhere around $30,000 in 2025. So this is why our process is in February. We are, and one more click, please. So our final selection will be for element E. So in 2026. So part of it is to really get this concept down and to work with you to develop this feasibility study. Like we said, we may award up to 2. One click, or next slide, please. Okay, just to say, anyone who's eligible, you can propose that research barrier, even if you are not what OHSU would consider an eligible PI for funding. We'll have to work with you on that. But frankly, if you have a great idea, we want that idea. Okay, next slide, please. So what would that pilot study do? I'm just going to focus really on this last thing. It can provide some initial support for a proof of concept, but it may also, you know, help stimulate you to think about a different translational science option than what you may think about every day. Next slide, please. How will this be reviewed? So every proposal, there is a format for this letter of intent. So you can go to that. There'll be a QR code. There's a lot of ways of getting this proposal. But each proposal wants you to think about a translational science question or hypothesis, and wants you to think about then, what's the focus? What's the case? What's the setting? That translational research question that is part of it. So that's why I went through that parallel slide about the translational research hypothesis, and the translational science. We're going to focus on the translational science impact. Think about, does this pose a generalizable problem? Would this improve the efficiency or speed of translation? Is this a disruptive innovation? Does it make use of team science? In other words, multiple disciplines, multiple partners, perhaps. Those are the things that we will encourage. Okay, next slide, please. Wrapping up. So frankly, I can tell you that from other institutions around the country, often the very best ideas come from people who are more in the weeds. So the very best insights can sometimes come from staff. That's why we really want to hear your input. We're open also to the broad range of OCTRI research, of research challenges. However, I do want to say we want to keep things a little bit in alignment with our strengths so that our application of our UM1 going forward has a solid, cohesive look. We don't expect you to have a shovel-ready project, to use phrases from, 8-10 years ago now. We really expect to work with you to help and to collaborate on this. 30,000 may not seem like a tremendous amount of money. On the other hand, we're offering you specific support within OCTRI with some of our services as part of that. If you have any questions at all, please do feel free to reach out to the OCTRI Navigator for advice. And then keep in mind, this is only our very first outreach on translational science. If we're successful in this application, the opportunities for participation are only going to be increasing. All right, so that's all. I'm happy to take questions in whatever time remains. And click one more slide, and here's the QR code, and you can download the application either way here.
So we have 3 minutes. Feel free to put a question in the chat for Cindy. I found the best way to get people to ask questions is to start wrapping up the town hall. So
For sure.
I'm wrapping it up, so get your questions in. Well, I guess we're going to presume that everything was really clear, which seemed to me. And so I want to thank you, Cindy, for presenting today. And those of you who are looking at the chat will see that Trish has put in some information about slides and access to more information, et cetera. See you all later.
Thank you.